Charles Darwin. This is Darwin looking like a grand Victorian gentleman and the author of a groundbreaking book. Oh, and here is that book on the origin of the species. Here's Darwin again. This one is not such a flattering portrait. This is Darwin, the grandson of an ape. There are many portrayals of Charles Darwin's life and the impact of his work upon our thinking. This is ours. It's called Dear Darwin, Because of You.
Dear Charles Darwin, in my view, you are one of the greatest scientists who has ever lived.
Dear Darwin, your ideas have changed the world and helped us to understand more about life and how we got here.
Dear Mr. Darwin, because of you I no longer believe in God. You have completely wrecked my faith.
Dear Darwin, I know that you made many of your discoveries while on the voyage to the islands around South America. I think the ship you travelled on was called the Beagle.
In a ship called the Beagle. I want to know, was the ship called after the type of dog, the Beagle? You want to know about the Beagle. It was a naval ship with a crew of over 70 men and 10 guns. And yes, it was called after the Beagle dog, which is a hunting dog.
Dear Darwin, your ideas have changed the world and helped us to understand more about life and how we got here. You lived in the Victorian times, and I wonder what a sea voyage was like back then. Did you suffer from scurvy or any seasickness?
Scurvy? No, not scurvy. The Navy were well aware of scurvy by then. We carried dried apples and lemon juice, but I struggled to take those, and I struggled with just about everything else. Seasickness. Oh, I was so wretchedly ill from the outset to the end of the voyage. I was such a poor sailor. But the compensations were great. What I learned on that voyage, what I discovered, what I saw for myself, were quite astonishing.
Dear Darwin, I know that you were inspired when you saw the wildlife in the Galapagos Islands. I want to know, did you come up with the idea of evolution totally out of the blue?
Interesting question. Of course, my grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a committed evolutionist. The problem with, of course, grandfather Erasmus was that he had absolutely no scientific evidence. It was only really when I went on my voyage and started to observe things that the idea that one creature could have evolved from another started to show itself before my very eyes. The similarities between different species of the same animal, of the same insect, the variety. Of course, the finches on the Galapagos are a good example of this, but I was far too ignorant as a young man to see it at first. And I was very grateful to John Gould, an ornithologist in England, who pointed out to me, and in answer to my question, are these all finches, or are they different species? I was amazed when he answered yes and yes to both questions. Yes, they are all finches, and yes, they are different species. 12 of them.
Well, Darwin didn't just find finches on the Galapagos. He found a vast array of different animals on different islands and was blown away by the variety of life that he saw. One of the things that he did find was that many of the islands had huge island tortoises on them. Due to island speciation, these tortoises had grown to enormous sizes. In fact, he delighted in riding some of them around the island. They were so large. What he did was he would collect these tortoises, and unfortunately not particularly for science, like everybody else at the time, like the whalers that visited the islands, he collected them for food, and actually commented that tortoise was one of the most succulent and delicious animals he'd ever eaten. Whilst he was on Chatham Island, he actually met a gentleman who confessed that he could tell which island a tortoise came from by the shape of its shell. Now, Darwin had so many animals to look at, he obviously didn't pay much attention to this statement, but he did note it down on his notebook, which is just as well, because by the time he'd returned to London, he'd had actually eaten all of the specimens of Galapagos tortoise that there were. However, looking back over his data, he realised that this information was very much like the differences you can find between finches, and that if each island actually had a different tortoise on it, then this might support his idea of natural selection through evolution.
Darwin's story, then, is a lot more complicated than you might at first think. He was not, it turns out, the sole originator of the theory of evolution. But then, nothing in life is black and white, even when you're doing an experiment that's been set up to make a particular point, like this one. There are usually one or two rogue results to cast a little uncertainty into your findings. And you know what? Even when something is reasonably well agreed, there are usually different perspectives on how to interpret the findings. Meanwhile, on with Darwin's story. So far we know that he sailed in the Beagle on a 5-year voyage that took him around South America. As he went he took notes, but he didn't realise at the time half the value of what he was seeing. It was his friend, John Gould, who pointed out that the beaks of the birds on the Galapagos Islands seemed to have changed from place to place. But Darwin was a great scientist. He had the patience and the determination to gather together the evidence and test the different clues to see if it all really did add up. He was fascinated by the puzzle of whether seeds could cross an ocean by floating through the salty water and survive to grow new plants in a new place. In fact, left to his own devices, Darwin would have carried on testing his ideas and writing letters to friends for more information for many, many years. But fate had something else in store, and long before Darwin felt he was ready, he was pushed towards publication.
You see, I was under so much pressure to publish. I did not feel that I was ready. I did not feel that the evidence was yet strong enough, not complete. But my friends, Hooker and Huxley, publish now, Darwin. We knew that Wallace was about to publish his, and the pressure was such that I published. On a Sunday, my wife Emma and the children come to church and I accompany them on the walk, but I stop at the church gate. They go in to service, but I do not. I cannot accept anymore. I have lost what little faith I had. These gravestones remind me of the death of our dear daughter Annie, whom we loved so much, and she was taken from us as a child. This affected what little faith I had greatly. Of course, I am not barred from the church, you understand. Nobody has said I cannot go in because of what I have written. No, it is my choice. And the church has not taken any formal position against the idea of evolution. And I am yet to take up a definite idea about the nature of God and creation. When I see the wonders around me, I think there must be something bigger. But I cannot accept divine revelation. I cannot accept the service. And when I see these wonders, as some would say, of God's creation, what I see is the evolution of species.
Dear Darwin, we have studied the debate at Oxford. What happened that day?
This is it. The Oxford University Museum, the venue on the 30th of June 1860 for a great hullabaloo. It was billed as the annual meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. But we had wind that Samuel Wilberforce, the Bishop of Oxford, was about to take advantage of this location to attack my work. My good friend and defendant Thomas Huxley was up for the fight. Personally, I was not able to attend. I was ill again. I was taking the waters, hydrotherapy at Richmond upon Thames.
Now, the reason this debate took place at this point was it was a year after the publication of Darwin's Origin of the Species, and people had packed in here to see the main contenders, which was Soapy Sam Wilberforce, the Bishop of Oxford, and Darwin's bulldog, Huxley.
I imagine what it would have been like.
Thank you, Professor Draper. My lords, ladies and gentlemen, we now arrive at the moment you've been waiting for, a debate on creation or evolution. In the blue corner, representing creationism, give it up for those Bishop of Oxford. Yes, this is the man whose nickname is Soapy Sam because he continuously is washing those hands. He is the one and only Reverend Dr. Samuel Soapy Sam Wilberforce. And in the red corner, representing the new science of evolution, now called Darwinism, please welcome your challenger, Professor Thomas Huxley, also known as Darwin's Bulldog.
So they packed in, everyone was there, the great and the good, and even Fitzroy, Captain Fitzroy, the captain of the Beagle, was there, apparently pacing up and down, waving his Bible, shouting, "Blasphemy, blasphemy." And this is where we get these fantastic quotes, where the Bishop of Oxford apparently remarked, "On which side of your family are you descended from an ape, sir? Is it on your grandfather's side or your grandmother's side?" To which Huxley reportedly replied, "I would rather be descended from an ape, sir, than use the divine to stifle the truth."
I wonder whether Professor Huxley will tell us if it is on his grandfather's side or his grandmother's side that he is descended from a monkey.
I'm not ashamed to have a monkey as an ancestor. It'd be even worse to have it be connected with you who doesn't even believe in scientific truth.
Because of you, I no longer believe in God.
I have been asked to write a letter on behalf of students that feel that their faith has been lost through Charles Darwin, saying that animals evolved into humans. Dear Mr. Darwin, because of you, I no longer believe in God. Don't take this personally because you're obviously not the only scientist on the planet, but basically you've completely wrecked my faith. I used to think humans are special and were put on here by God, but now I know humans have evolved and we are just a load of cells trying to survive. It's hard to believe in science when you've been brought up to believe in God, but none of my friends believe in God, and so now I think evolution is probably true. I don't have a question, but you can reply if you want.
I was never particularly strong in my beliefs. I just accepted as a young man those things which I was taught. And then my daughter died. She was only a child, and it affected me and my wife most terribly. And that, I think, destroyed the last bit of faith that I had. But I was never anti-religious, you understand, in the work that I did. Many people of strong religious belief had no problems at all with what I had said about evolution. Many ministers of the church itself did not oppose what became known as Darwinism, a term that I don't particularly subscribe to. No, the issue was made public in a sensational form. They used it as a big argument between evolution and religion.
How do we humans come to exist? What's the truth? The truth is that there are lots of things to think about. But thinking takes time, and it doesn't make exciting TV, and it doesn't make for a lively debate. Maybe it's not surprising that at the Oxford Museum, the complicated issue of how humans come to be here was presented as two simple options: creation or evolution. And notice the word or. What about creation and evolution? We could have had three options: creation, evolution, or creation and evolution. But three options doesn't fit with the debate format, so clearly that wasn't going to get a hearing. And when Darwin says that the arguments for each side were oversimplified, he's not kidding. For example, with the science, well, Darwin's idea was that humans and apes have evolved from a common ancestor way back in the past. But that's not how it came across on the day. Instead, we get the attention-grabbing headline that
Darwin is saying that man is an ape. As simple as that. They simplified it to that extent. But you know what newspapers are? I suspect they're rather the same in your time as in mine. They look for the sensational. They look for the argument that is more likely to sell the newspaper than is to enlighten the reader.
Okay, you've got a choice, sweet or sour. Which one do you want?
I think I'll do sour.
Oh, definitely sour.
whenever there's a really complicated question, we rely on others to do the groundwork for us and to organise everything into a small number of viewpoints so that we can make a choice. Okay, so suppose we want to look at all the issues ourselves and investigate everything from scratch. Good idea? I'm not so sure.
Okay, you've got a free choice. Which one do you want?
Sweet. That one's... Oh,
How long would it take to dig out everything that was ever said, discovered and written down on the issue of evolution and creation? I'm exhausted at the thought.
How long did that take?
About 23 seconds.
We were right then. It took way longer.
In the real world, we rely on others to do the groundwork for us and to organise everything into a small number of viewpoints. But if that's the strategy we want, how many different viewpoints should we be asking for? The more options, the more time it takes to look at them each. Is it worth it? Well, that depends.
Dear Darwin, your ideas have changed the world and helped us to understand more about life.
In my view, you are one of the greatest scientists who has ever lived.
Because of you, I no longer believe in God. You have completely wrecked my faith.
I don't think that's really fair. I would like to think that you will get a much more balanced view of my work than what happened in my time, when so much of the debate and the anger was really about the idea that man is an ape. The issue was made public in a sensational form. And if we can understand that, I think we will get to the roots of what your study is all about.